it's not like the customer is always right as far as what you should do design wise, but you should listen to the feedback and decide what you need to potentially modify, like instructions. It's very simple.
This is On Camera, On Brand, a show for professionals who want to look good on camera, but don't have the time or expertise to turn their office into a Hollywood studio. In each episode, Rob Ruscher uncovers how professionals can get the most from their home or office setups. If you invest the time to share your stories on camera, you should be on brand.
Welcome to the show. We'll just jump into it. I've heard doing long intros reduces retention by a ton, so I think we can just jump into it.
Sure, why not? Yeah, no, it's great to be on camera with you and hitting record.
Yeah, and I love the new studio. You have a new space here. It looks like you got the background going, and I mean, I'll even start. I guess we'll just start the conversation, then we'll back up so people can know about you and Plexicam, because that's what we're going to talk about a bit today in a book you have.
Sure. Yeah.
But you obviously felt it important enough to take over the basement and put some money and time, a lot of time, into figuring out your look. Like, obviously it's fun, but you must see a value to that professionally. Otherwise you wouldn't have put so much time. So how did that come to be? How did you decide what to do and even like come to the realization that this is important, for my career to have a professional looking setup?
Yeah, so I mean, if I had stepped back in time, it probably reflects back to I was going to be a professional musician, went to Berklee College of Music, and that's why I'm still in the Boston area. It was a long time ago. So, being on stage, you don't play on a stage that has no lights and no sound and no audience, right? If you're going to attract any sort of audience and retain them and get them excited, you need to put effort into what your performance, your show, your experience, whatever you want to call it, what that looks and feels like. And back in 2006, I'd gone through a whole bunch of things in my career, which we don't necessarily need to talk about, but it was technical, like IT. It was an IT guy. I became the CTO, was a market analyst for enterprise software, things like that. And I started doing audio podcasts back in 2006. And so I could tap back into my skills that I had from Berklee and do audio editing. And also I love to learn constantly. So I would interview book authors and CEOs and software companies that I was working with, which now we would call content marketing. It was just a podcast at the time, but trying to level up the quality of my audio at the time was hard, really. I mean, there was like no options that were satisfactory. But once video came on, I thought, oh, now video was pretty rare. And if I'm going to bother doing it, I might as well, step it up a bit and take advantage of the fact that I know and care about experiences. And like, I mean, you can put as much money as you want to fire into getting all sorts of equipment, and happy accident, I will say, I had a pipe burst about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, that was not horrific, but it did enough damage and interrupted enough that I decided to radically strip back everything in this room. And it is far less hot, among other things, from the lighting. And it's just much simpler. So I'm not quite to the point where I can hit one button or just, have Google or Alexa do the thing, but I'm getting there, and that would be lovely, because being able to just hit record, that is really what I'm aiming for. And it all matters, because it's like, this is my brand. It doesn't matter whether it's for Plexicam or for me as an individual or any company I'm working with, but this is, I'd like to present and be seen as professional, just like I would if I was going to show up in person in your office.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I've heard it from someone else saying it's kind of the virtual suit. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to steal that, because I like that. I like that saying, because it kind of is. Because
Without
if
the
you
necktie.
yeah, I know. Like, if you went to a job interview, and I think, I mean, I dress differently depending on who I'm talking to. I feel like it's part of relating. I feel like I'm still me and authentic to myself. But, for the
Yeah.
podcast, I like to put on a collared shirt. I'm talking to professionals, a lot of CEOs, business owners. So if I went to your place of business, or if I met you at a coffee shop, I'm not showing up in shorts and a t-shirt,
Right.
And I've also noticed, to your point too, it can be easy to get carried away. And I
Oh,
find
yeah.
that too sometimes, like you were saying, like it's because it's fun, to buy all the lights. And I feel like, even for me, I've even stripped back. Like, I'm down to just one light, and like you mentioned, the lights in my background are attached to the Google, just to make that process easier. And it's not
Yep.
even anything that crazy. I mean, I think those bulbs are like $20 from Home Depot. I just got some smart brand. And the next thing I want to do, I don't know if you played with, are the smart plugs, because then you can have your lights plugged in that aren't like your actual video lights and attach a name to that. So it really can be a little bit, for
Yep.
those that don't want to flip the switch on, that can take a lot of time flipping all those switches.
Well, even just convenience. I mean, things like I've done a lot of consulting work, which is about usually business process and how do you streamline and make it more efficient. So this is a process, right, that helps to run my business. I should make it efficient so I can do it as often as I want to, not that I need to necessarily, but to, like the video it's a real thing. If you haven't realized yet, video is a thing that you should probably care about. It doesn't really matter what you do professionally. It's such a great way to get your personal brand out there. I don't know what people are calling it these days beyond personal brand, but it just makes so much sense to let let some evidence speak for you. And if people decide you're credible, they could hire, maybe they'll steal you away from a full-time job or offer to bring you on in a startup or hire as a contractor or a consultant or whatever. And just by having the content out there, having people find you is a very different experience than cold calling or cold emailing or doing whatever you're trying to, or even spending money on advertising to get in front of the right people. So if you can put the right bait out there, essentially, all sorts of good things can happen, which is why I did the audio podcast back in 2006, and it worked out amazing for me. Stupidest thing I ever did was to stop doing it.
Yeah, I had a podcast, I think it was like 2017, 2016, 17, and I stopped too. And I was like, man, I should have just kept going or added
Yeah.
video. So you have a podcast now though, so, and that's all video. So when did that come back, the podcast? And was video always a part of that? Or again, did you start audio only just to dip your toes back in and then add video?
Yeah, so I have two podcasts. One is for Plexicam, so it's about Plexicam clients and experts that I think people should know about, like you, Mark Bowden, a bunch of people that are, super professional at how do you present and how do you show up well on camera. Some people who have masters in acting and have played Shakespearean roles and all sorts of fun stuff. And that's partly for me to learn because I'm always looking for tips, but it's also for us to share with our audience, our customers and partners. And then, so that's called Insights for Pros. And next feature today is actually the idea that I had in late March 2020 when everything went into lockdown. And I thought, wow, so lots of businesses got disrupted. Who knows how long this is going to last? Whatever plan you had is probably not going to work anymore because everything just changed. The entire world just, ground to a halt. We flew off into outer space. So what do you do now? And so I had the genesis of the idea then, to help, interview people and talk to people about what can you do? If you didn't start setting up a personal brand, maybe now's a good time so you can stand out and be ahead of the curve and get familiar with video. So I did it as video to force myself to get on camera, among other things, because I love writing. I love doing research. I love doing podcasts in general. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of being on camera, but it's a necessity because the two companies that Tom and I, my partner, ended up starting back in 2020, Viventus, Virtual Events as a Service, and Plexicam, were both about video. So, well, how can I have two companies now that and not do video for both of them? So that's part of the reason I went a little nuts instantly and jumped straight into a mirrorless camera, which I'm still using, and getting more professional gear than I probably really needed. But it was partly I just wanted to force myself. I didn't get to execute on the podcast because we were busy starting up two companies. They're related, so it's not quite as insane as it might sound. But for me to jump into the idea, I wanted to make sure it was in video because I thought that was important. How can I talk about the future if the future that we're is being unveiled right now is all about video, and then now AI.
Yeah. And I mean, I like your point about the personal brand because one, I mean, I've gotten consulting work just by showing up and looking this way, and talking about what I'm doing, and someone privately I have this important call or I'm going on this person's, and it's like before you
Mm-hmm.
know it, so that's obviously a bonus. And I think it is like we are kind of living in that time this is kind of the future of video. It's not a trend. It's not going away. And a few people I've helped out have even mentioned like now they were like able to convince their bosses not to go in full time. Like I don't need to go in, or not full time. I'm sorry, not to go back
In
into the
person.
office, and not
Yeah.
even have to do hybrid, because it's like my setup at home looks better than what you have in the
Right.
office. I look
Yeah.
better, I sound better, and I have more capabilities in home. And
Mhm.
it's just like, as a boss, how are you going to say no to that? I know
Right.
there's, because it's almost this crazy part, at least in Pittsburgh, is like people are, or companies are trying to force employees back into the office because they have all this rent to pay and no one's
Right.
using it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, if you can be one of those people on top of other ways to convince why to stay home, I can't think of a better answer to say my home office is better than what you have there, and I
Yeah.
don't have to commute. So I
No,
think there's a
and I
lot of
mean,
added benefits to it, future proofing with this.
yeah. Well, and like we were talking before we hit record, I mean, the prices of everything, the capabilities of everything, they're radically different now, and they're getting better. Unlike almost everything else in the world right now, like the price of a sandwich is twice what it was
Oh
4
my
years ago.
gosh.
Do you remember when eggs were like 5 times the price that they normally were because
Yeah.
during a period of COVID? But lights, they're smaller, they're brighter, they take less energy, they're less heat generation or no heat generation, depending on what you have. Things like I didn't know what an ND filter was until I started using a mirrorless camera. Like, oh, that helps, among other things, soften the effect that I have on camera.
Hmm.
And then the shallow depth of field, which I still don't know. How do you pronounce it? Bokeh. What's
Yeah,
the official?
bokeh
Bokeh. All right. I'm
is
going to
how
start
I've
saying it
heard
like
it.
that because I have
Bokeh.
never known.
Yeah, bokeh is basically, it's the lens is doing the work. Because if you think of a camera, there's like even with a prime, you have a piece of glass in front of the lens and then a piece of glass at the rear of the lens. And as you focus, it's kind of like it's kind of fun too. I don't know if you've ever shot macro, but you can almost like see the line of focus. It's like a skinny little line, and as you like rack from what's in front to back, you can do it. And then and then bokeh is like, it's kind of a mix. It's the blur of the background, but if you get real techie, it's like the characteristics. Because once you get to like the more expensive lenses and you're shooting films, commercials, like that's part of a reason you would choose a lens, is like what will the background look like and how will it flare
Right.
the lens. So
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not that
And
anyone
I don't
being
go
on
that
camera
far.
needs all.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's fascinating that, about the, like different shapes that can show up in your soft background. Yeah, that's wild, but it is incredibly dangerous for me to start pursuing that.
Yeah, it gets a little bit. It is funny how it all ties together. And then somehow, like, because I remember it was for a while, I tried to be the type of cinematographer where I wasn't trying to be too technical. For some reason I had in my head, I just want to be organic and da da da, which I don't know, maybe I was just being lazy. But then when I actually took the time and I memorized like a stop of light is measured this way in every type
Mm,
of setting and knew like the ins and outs, it was like, wow, I'm just faster. I'm way
yeah,
faster on set and like picking out items, and almost to the point, and I'm sure people can relate in their perspective fields, but it's almost like I can see this isn't going to work. It's like before I need to
yeah,
set up everything or build this whole thing out, I can already tell there's a few red flags that's not going to
yeah,
work. But so to
exactly.
switch gears too, because obviously you felt it was really important, and you have a company, Plexicam, which those that don't know, it's a great device. I use it for my second camera, so when I go to my screen over here and I'm talking to people, I can still look them right in the eye. But it's a simple plexiglass device that sits on your laptop or monitor. You can get different sizes, and I'll let you kind of fill in where I'm missing. But what I love most about it is how I can go from a mirrorless camera to a webcam to an iPhone and just having a different mount,
Yeah.
which I really like. And so as like you upgrade maybe your camera, you can use the same device. So why don't you just start from the beginning? How did the company start? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah. Yeah. So my business partner is Tom Kalopoulos. We've known each other since 1994. And among other things, we co-wrote this book in 2014, which is essentially about what's the future of work, which is a topic that's ever evolving and more important than ever, arguably. And Tom's a very handy guy. So like I was the first IT guy that he hired back in 1994 at Delphi Group, and eventually became CTO and marketing analyst and consultant. I kept saying yes to things and forgetting to say no to things that I was doing originally. So I don't know how I did it. So I'm technically handy, although I don't code anymore. But I understand technology pretty well, and I can translate it to other people, and that's part of my sort of secret set of skills, if you will. Tom is very physically handy, partly because his dad was a engineer, electrical engineer, and an engineer, and Tom also has a really big 250-year-old house, I believe, in New England here. And if you have a big old house like that, you cannot possibly afford to pay other people to work on it like every day, because that's what it is. So he's extremely handy. He's got skills that I wouldn't even comprehend, like rewiring his house and, plumbing and all sorts of stuff. I would never be capable of. But he's also, I didn't realize that he's one of the best keynote speakers I've ever met. And I met him back in 1994. And I didn't realize, I came from music. I didn't know keynote speakers from anything. I didn't know what that was. It didn't take long, but I didn't realize that I'd stumbled into an organization with somebody who was just so damn good at public speaking. And it totally, he could, drop in, he could wander in here right now and go. And it just be totally natural, be fascinating. And that's what he loves to do too. So he's always looking, how can he improve his game as a professional speaker? He would prefer to be on a big stage, talking to 10,000 people and getting them to think and, getting them to kick into the action the day they go back to the office. But what happens when the world shuts down? So he called me like March 20th, I think, and said, "Hey, so what are you going to do now that the curtain came down?" I was like, "Well, I have a feeling that you have an idea." And that was the two companies. So Plexicam it's funny because and I purposely wear these glasses. Clam it's transparent. It's plexiglass. It hangs on your screen. So we call it like a zero footprint instead of a tripod, which is, or C-stands or anything like that. They can take up a huge amount of floor space or desk space, whatever. And you got to put your camera somewhere. So do you really want to carve out a piece of your desk, which in 2020, you probably didn't have a dedicated home office. You had whatever you could cobble together on a moment's notice, and you had limited space, undoubtedly. So this takes up no space. You hang it on your existing monitor. You can put any kind of camera. There's different models for different kinds of cameras. There's a mirrorless or a DSLR, or any of the fancier cameras are much heavier, especially front heavy with the lenses. But it just gets we literally want it to disappear. So the point of Plexicam is not about Plexicam. The point about Plexicam is to enable you to show up your best, to feel confident for the people that you're talking to, whether it's a job interview or a podcast interview or a manager talking to staff or salespeople. We have lawyers, virtual court cases that have been run with Plexicams behind the scenes for expert witnesses, among other things, and lawyers. So it's meant to be super simple. I think it's ironic that this part of my life is all about a physical, very simple plastic product that I would, if you talked to me 5 years ago, what? But my life has been about hardware and software and enterprise stuff, not about goods that, we sell on Amazon now, which I would have never expected I was going to sell anything on aside from books. But it's really, it's wild. It's meant to get out of the way. It's super simple. It's still, for some people that have two left hands, I've seen some funny configurations. I don't even know how you got it assembled that way. But beyond that, it's meant to be super simple and it's modular. Even though Tom, who's Greek, he was the inventor of it. I have a Danish ancestry, so about 6 generations ago. So I grew up with Legos, and it's built to be modular, so you can morph it into all sorts of stuff we never even considered. And we intend that you should be able to step into it and then grow with it and focus on the other stuff. Who cares beyond that? Your camera's in the right place. Fantastic. Now be a great lawyer or be a great product manager or whatever it is that you do.
Yeah, because at the most, I think the biggest problem it solves, at least that I, on my opinion, is that you get perfect framing while being able to keep eye contact, which is really hard. If I were to film an interview, it's a lot of times we're measuring the ground and we adjust the camera as soon as someone sits down because there is this almost ideal camera lens height. And just thinking, just in terms of you don't look too powerful and you don't look too small, because if you're down low, not only do you look a little bigger in frame and there's just the psychological of just being, over the person. That's why in movies they'll do it on purpose, but you're also seeing up your nose a little bit, and you're seeing the ceiling fan go, and there's all these
Yeah.
things. And for me, and I'm very honest with this when I talk to people and I do software demos, it's like it's really hard for me to trust you when you look and sound the way you are. And I don't know how to say that nicely sometimes, but when people give me ask for feedback, I always take a second. I'm like, do you really want feedback, or do you want to just hear nice things? Because
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
even those hard switches. And that's what I think with yours. Like, otherwise, you have to get a tripod and you have to get a lens to zoom in. And now it's like, no, you could get your iPhone and some books on your
Yeah.
laptop, and you will have the best framing. You can go sit in your dining room now. And I
Mhm.
remember even doing that just because, during COVID, before all this, like, I would bring my camera cart and set it up just because I couldn't stand the look of it, because I know how it's supposed to look. So I
Yeah.
love that. And I love how modular it is, like you said, because you can, if you just have a webcam or you have nothing but an iPhone, you could start with that. And then eventually, if
Right.
you have a different camera, or like me, I love it as my second screen. I have a second angle. So when I turn, and if instead of talking to you like this and talking about you, you kind of lose that connection, And
Yeah.
I like on this conversation, it removes some of those barriers of the virtual calls. Like, I feel more like we're together in a similar space.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, once you taste it, in my opinion, you kind of like when you don't have it, like my home office upstairs is not at all, it's not at all set up. It's very small, among other things. So I don't have space behind me to get that kind of effect or even put anything there. I have bookcases full of the books that I've read. And I have a ceiling fan, among other things. It's not ideal, but once you get it, like our earliest, because Tom's a great keynote speaker, and we've both been on LinkedIn forever, and we've have lots of connections. We know a lot of keynote speakers and professional speakers. So we seeded Plexicams to professional speakers early on in COVID, and that's how we would send out webcams with Plexicams to our clients of Viventus, for people who were mostly terrified to be on camera because they weren't prepared for COVID and they'd never been on camera. So they might have been perfectly good, like product managers who would get on stage at a user conference and walk around and talk to people. And, once you've done that, you might still get nervous and all that, but you've done it before, right? And you're not confined to one space, and you don't have to worry about, is somebody looking at my nose? Because that's impossible. It's just very different. So webcams were also impossible to get early in 2020 when everybody, like billions had to be produced and sold because everybody needed them. So we got to beta test Plexicams with people who are normal humans who didn't really want to be on camera, but that was the thing they needed to, if they're going to have a user conference, it was going to be a virtual user conference and not just another Zoom call, which we all quickly got bored of, but more of an experience. It was higher production and, lower thirds and all sorts of details like production podcasts would have. And then on the other side, we had sort of the extreme. So regular people who just needed to be on camera for professional reasons, and then professionals who already, they own $10,000 suits and they fly first class, and they charge $25,000 to $100,000 for professional, speech, and fly all over the world, and unfortunately have millions of miles on United and other terrible airlines like that. So between the two of those, like, oh, this is not only is it an idea that Tom used himself, and he had a version that thankfully we don't sell, that he created like 10 years ago, I think. And it worked, and it proved out the idea of, inserting something in front of you that you could put a camera on. But, to professionalize it and make it into a real product, that's a very different thing. And I had no idea. Well, I had an idea of what we were getting into. And initially I told Tom that I didn't want to do Plexicam because what do we know about direct to consumer and physical goods and owning manufacturing and all the relationships and all, because I could anticipate all the problems that, we're going to have to solve. But I mean, my entire career has been completely made up because it's not like I studied any of this. I've been, the one class they taught at Berkeley for business had nothing to do with anything that would be involved in this. But how, so I anticipated it, and because we tested out with normal people and they loved it, and they would keep showing up at these virtual events with all the gear that we gave them because they loved it. And the professional people who, like, maybe they had really blown out studios at home that they had built a long time ago because they were constantly in that search for a much better, presentation style. Did they want that when they went to a hotel, or if they were in a different house, or they went traveling somewhere and holed up in some other country or something? Because why not? I'm going to be stuck indoors must look somewhere else I want to be. So that was an interesting learning from both those extremes, and I would love to say it was planned, but it was kind of accidental that we learned it that way.
Well, I mean, good timing, and then it seems like you were able to kinda adapt a little bit. And to
Yeah.
me, it's like one of those, it's such a simple product. It works so well because of that. And the other thing I've used it for is, like, when traveling and flying, because again, it's so,
Yeah.
you know, not the big, especially the laptop-sized Plexicam is so
Mhm.
small that I was able to throw it in with my laptop, like, with a
Mm.
carry-on, and then I just use my iPhone. So it's like even when
Yep.
I was on the road, obviously I had to pack the mic and stuff, but still for the video portion at least, it was like I added 1 foot of plexiglass to my carry-on bag,
Right.
like, and you could wrap it in a towel in the carry-on or bring it. I mean, I had it in my check bag, sorry, but still, I love that aspect because then in the hotel, again, like framing shouldn't be hard, but that's because I'm used to having a tripod or, and I
Yeah.
can get the camera exactly what I want, but you're not going to fly. You don't want to fly with that unless, I mean, I actually do fly with that usually. So that's a different story because I'm usually flying with gear,
Normal people
but
don't travel with a
yeah, if
tripod.
you have a presentation and you still want to record the podcast, and that's why I did bring it because I had a guest I really wanted to get on. It was the only time they could do it. It's like, okay, fine. I'll just pack a few extra things. And a hotel room is not that hard to make look good. You get by a window, and then again, just being able to easily frame to not see the ceiling and the floor. It
Yeah.
wasn't that hard to get I mean, I spent like 5 minutes, which
Right.
was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And we eventually created the Road Warrior line, which includes an LED light I mean, it's not $1,000 light. So it's, it is what it is, but it's very small. It's super portable. It's rechargeable. Plus you can use it while it's plugged in, and it's a white light that's color adjustable. So you can match it to your, whatever room light you happen to be dealing with, or windows. And it comes with a case, and you can throw it in your bag, and that's the intention, right? So maybe not that we're not trying to, like, at this point in my life, I'm not trying to sell people things they don't need, and and sell them a lot of things like, well, since you bought that, you should really get wink wink this. We don't need to do that. So if it's appropriate, maybe you have, like, for me, I have a Plexicam Max and a Sony mirrorless and a bunch of lights. If I was going to go on the road, I would not take all that stuff with me. That'd be insane. So I leave that set up here, and these days I take like an Insta360 camera, which is awesome. And, a Plexicam Mini, you could stick it on a laptop when you're traveling, or there's like 60 to 70-inch TVs in almost every hotel in the world at this point. Hang it on there, and now you have a gigantic, teleprompter alternative that you probably don't even have at home. So take advantage of the stuff that just happens to be there, and you can look and feel professional wherever you want to go, and it's not a big deal, which is, again, the point is not for you to obsess about us. It's, we take care of the simple stuff, get it out of the way, and you focus on being, awesome at whatever it is that you do.
Yeah. Because even if you're not recording, I think there's such value if you're selling, if you're trying
Oh
to
yeah.
sell your services. So I'm thinking of the traveling salesperson that might be on the road doing something and still have a call, or maybe you're a guest on a podcast. Like, again, going back to our original conversation, almost to bring a full circle, is like the importance of having that brand, and having
Yeah.
control over the way you want to look versus like, well, we'll see what it looks like when I open up my laptop and what you see. It just gives you a little bit of ability to be like, no, I want to look this way and be treated this way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's always outliers, like Gary V's is famous, Carrie Neistat. There's all Alex Hormozy. There's tons of people that are, they able to shoot wherever they happen to be. And because they're producing so much content and they already have a big following, it doesn't matter. Right. So they don't need to necessarily put super high gloss into things, but it's so easy with what we've built to level up with very little effort. And why not continue on, looking and feeling like you're a professional? Like you wouldn't show up to one meeting as a salesperson at a law firm in a suit one day and then come in shorts and flip flops the next day, especially if you haven't closed the deal, but probably not even if you had. So you probably don't want to have that jarring a disassociation between, like, I saw you with a clown nose here, and now you're in a $10,000 suit. That's, something's weird here, and I don't trust you. And what happened? So
Yeah.
you don't have to be totally consistent on what you look like from, from video to video, even if you're recording and posting it on YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever. But it shouldn't be a huge difference, in my opinion. It shouldn't be such a radical difference that he cared this time, and then that time was totally up his nose, and the lights shining over his shoulder and blinding us at the same time. So what?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's also, I mean, sometimes in just the career I've been in, when I look at like the gear, which I definitely see
Mm,
as tools, it's not always about how good does it make things look, but
right.
sometimes it's simply how easy does it make my job?
Yeah.
Like you were
Mm,
saying, like for me, the way I have my set up here, which I love, is I didn't need 30 minutes to prepare for our call, like visually. I
yeah.
was drinking coffee down here, handling some emails, finishing up another consulting call, and then I just quickly came over. And so
Right.
like for me, it's just like that's the value for me is that I don't need to build in an extra hour and anxiety and stress before
Right.
every time I get on camera. And then I just think it makes me perform better. I feel like I can be more like myself and hopefully produce better content because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the production value adds a certain amount, but it's what is the content? And if it's not compelling content, then who cares? It could be shot in glorious 8K, 360 degrees, but who. Great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, and I'd love to kind of wrap up the call if you're good with it, maybe a few quick fire, rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
So
Yep.
think of like version 1 of Plexicam, the first thing you guys physically were able to use and you test yourself versus now. Are there any like huge things you were wrong about or that you just learned? And we'll skip all the Amazon and those answers because I know the actual selling D2C versus B2B is quite different. But just in terms of like what you thought people would use or need versus how they are using it now or what they're requesting.
Yeah. So I've never posted it, but I should. So Tom literally made all the plexicams for the first 6 months by himself, by hand. So when I said he's handy, I mean like literally he bought heat tables that I didn't even know existed that you can use to bend plastic, many of them at a time instead of one at a time. We're not like hand chiseling these out of a big block of acrylic or something. But, blow torching the sides of things, there's all sorts of details that it seems very simple, but it's not like we're not going to win an Edison prize or something for like the world's best design camera mount. But the little details, I mean, to make it as clear as possible, there's lots of different grades of material that you can use. And one thing we didn't know up front was, these come in like the size sheets that you get a full sheet of plywood or drywall or things like that. And the thickness is not consistent normally, unless you pay more to get consistent because it gets rolled out.
Oh, I
And
didn't
so
know
what?
that.
Yeah, look, why would we know that? Like Tom's experiments were less than a full sheet. It was just little pieces that he got at Home Depot or whatever. But once you need to scale up, like so, how do you make these consistently? How do you get consistent thickness? Because we would get people like, I can't connect the friction sleeve, which is kind of the magic of this friction sleeve connecting this shelf to the vertical
Yeah, and
of
just the
the
shoe,
Plexicam.
you
Yeah,
can kind of see. So it's like
yeah,
super clear. I mean, you
yeah,
barely, as you
exactly.
can tell. So,
Yeah, and it's funny that like one tip that I sometimes forget to tell people, by the way, like I highly recommend that whatever's on your desktop is as much black as possible, so it's not more light that's coming at you, it's less reflection that's coming at you, and like for acrylic, if it's a black background, then it's way easier to see through it. Not like it's not like it's opaque suddenly if you turn on the lights or something. But it makes a huge difference actually, and it looks way more transparent. So that's a secret tip for those who haven't heard it before. The use cases have definitely changed. Like what's the appropriate size? It was all a guess for us. Like, is the mini, is it too small? Is it too big? Is the Pro too big? Is it too small? And what if people have like I'm not using it at the moment, but I have a 65-inch TV that I was using early on, and I had put together a custom made version that stretched all the way down from the top of that to eye level, which is only like 3 inches from the bottom of that thing. And, until we got feedback from real users, which is what you hear all the time, listen. It's not like the customer is always right as far as what you should do design wise, but you should listen to the feedback and decide what you need to potentially modify, like instructions. It's very simple. It's, like there's 3 pieces generally if you buy a mini or a pro: the vertical hanger that hangs on it, the friction sleeve, and the shelf. That's it. And the screw to mount to attach the camera to it. But it's not, it's not necessarily obvious to everybody that that's the case. So do we do written instructions? Do we do video instructions? Do we do both? Because who knows how people are going to want to consume it. And it's only searchable if it's in text, right? So, like that level of, people, there's trolls everywhere. People will come onto our Facebook ads and Instagram ads and it's just a piece of plastic. How hard can it be? Well, you know what? I know people who can rebuild engines from scratch by themselves with no sweat. I could pop the hood and then I'm done, So it's, it's, if it's easy for you, that's fantastic. And, again, we're not trying to make anything hard. We want it to be simple, but you like making fun of people that have some potential issues with, like, there's a couple ways you could not assemble it incorrectly, and it definitely will not work. And I've seen that, and it confused me the first time, but then I've seen it. I mean, until you tell people and show them, well, you shouldn't make people guess, was a massive learning for us. Just because Tom created it, obviously he knows how to assemble it. He showed it to me. I know how to assemble it, and a lot of people can do it themselves. But everybody says people don't read instructions or watch instructions. That's not true. And even if it was, there's always going to be some people that would benefit from that. So I think that was one of the biggest things. And then adding the light, we didn't do that initially. And because it is modular, it's very easy to add on another shelf, angle it up, attach the light to it, position it however you like. And there you go. Also very simple. It stays on top of there. It doesn't take up any more desk space. And you can throw it in a bag, as we discussed, and go on the road. And there you go. You have a nice little portable studio, essentially.
Was the light a client feedback, or is that something you guys realized just from using it yourself?
It was kind of a combination. We, like, our business, we don't have a business model where we're going to, like, hey, every year you need to buy a new Plexicam. That, that would be crazy. So what could we add on that would add value? And it's not just we're trying to pitch you on something. So it is valuable because most people haven't done anything about lighting. And as soon as you go down the rabbit hole, you can potentially spend a lot of money on lighting. So instead of having a huge financial barrier and then all the space it needs to take up, it occurred to both of us that, what are the add-ons that we could add that we've heard about or that we anticipate? Because, the people don't always know what they want necessarily, but they're like, okay, this is great. I can now look at people, but I still don't look quite like I want to, or how I'm presenting over the camera, audio or otherwise, isn't what I want. And, I've got a nice simple light, and we didn't create the light. We didn't build electronics, because that's a whole different game. So we partner with somebody, but it's meant to be super simple. It's inexpensive. It slaps right on there. There you go.
Yeah, and those are really great too, because anyone that's listening and that are using just the built-in face cam or a webcam that doesn't have manual controls, having that light as kind of like an eye light is great, because you'll be able to overpower how bright the background is. Because a lot of times the webcam will just kind of seek for what's going on, and if it's super bright in the background, it's reading, it'll start dimming you, and then that's when you look like you're in witness protection.
Exactly.
You're like, so that's usually not the look you want to go. Maybe it is, I don't know, maybe we're getting creative and you want to do something funny, you can go for that look. But in a professional setting, I think you want people to see your eyes and your face. So and also, even beyond that, like, I always recommend people put a window more on the side versus right in front of you, so that way if it is full sun, it doesn't like blast everywhere. But now you have light coming in here, and that little light on top of the Plexicam just gives you a nice little eye light, and it helps kind of wrap the lighting around. So yeah, I think it's really handy, and especially on the road. So again, the hotel example, if sit next to a window, or you only have a lamp, then you can dial it into the more orange setting, so it's the same color. And yeah, there's a lot you can do with a little when it comes to video, I feel like.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing has been a crazy journey that I was not expecting, but it is interesting that, we get people all the time. They're like, this thing is amazing. Like pretty early on, somebody contacted us. He's like, I have literally tried everything in the world that I could ever find for eye contact. They're all too complicated or too expensive. I mean, he also, it could have been less expensive if he just found one and stuck with it. So he spent a lot of money, but he was like, this is so simple. I'm putting everything away and I'm going to stop looking for any other alternatives because this is exactly what I was looking for. Why didn't we heard this a lot? Why didn't somebody invent this before? Like, well, if I could go back in time, I would do a lot of things differently, not necessarily improve Plexicam and bring it to market first, but, buying Apple stock on the first day, something like that.
There you go.
But it's funny. It's so simple. And people for the most part, they're not looking for, nobody's looking for an invisible, teleprompter, right? Which is a kind of what it is, or an invisible tripod or alternative tripod. But there are more people that are looking at, there's got to be a better way that doesn't involve just a camera that's too high and then you're getting it, down on your forehead and it looks like you're peering down, even though now it's in 4K, but now you still look like you're looking somewhere, somewhere else. That's why it's been a really interesting learning process.
Well, and even just what you said with the teleprompter is another thing that I use. And at first I just did like the free way. I just did Google Drive and Google Doc, and you could just have your text below and notes. And then now there's a software called Vodium. So like podium, but with a V. Yep. And it's just, it has, it just goes right up. It's just a little box that you can add the transparency so you can still see the person behind you if you're recording, or yourself if you're doing a self-recording. And then you can actually change the control speed. So I feel like that's like been a fun combination with Plexicam. Having a teleprompter software with that is pretty nice.
Yeah. And it's funny that, some people have heard about teleprompters and the traditional hardware setups and others haven't. And it's been around for a long time and it works. And if you're comfortable with setting it up and all the little quirks there are about teleprompter and glare and all that fun stuff, then, go for it. Again, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything they don't need. So if you have a better solution, you're happy with it, great.
Well, that's what I love about it. I have both. I'm looking at you through my teleprompter, my good camera, but then I have yours to travel with whenever I'm on the road. And then again, like I said, just to use as like a second angle if I'm referencing, especially during consulting sessions, because I want to keep that eye contact, keep engaged. But a lot of times I don't have every price memorized, so like I need to bring Amazon up and scroll around. For what's next with Plexicam? Is there any future things related to it that you're working on that you can share? Or are you guys at a good spot? You're maybe just like streamlining processes at this point?
Yeah, we're still, every day is a new lesson to be learned and dealing with it, like selling on Amazon. And there's always new competitors, which I think is good. Like lack of competitors is a bad sign. I learned that a long time ago. We have some things that we're considering bringing to market, which we might do some crowdfunding for. Not sure how that's going to go. It's in the vein of Plexicam, but it's also a very different take on things. So I don't want to give too much away at this point. But we got at least two ideas that we're playing around with that are, one's pretty radically different. I think would be a big deal to introduce the market. One is very small and subtle, but would also be another evolution of Plexicam. And the goal is like a lot of people, if we could make it invisible behind your screen, whatever, that's eventually that'll be coming, right? But until then, whatever we can do to shrink the footprint of anything that's on your screen, we would love to do that. So we're constantly working on how do we do that and listen to what our clients tell us.
So where can people keep in touch with you and Plexicam? Where do you live? Where's the best way to kind of stay up to date on that and learn more?
Sure. Yeah. So for Plexicam, if you want to buy direct from us, it's plexicam.com, plexicam.com. We do sell on Amazon. We sell more models direct off our site. Just makes it easier to handle logistics. We do have 2 models as of recording right now on Amazon. And for the Plexicam podcast, that's also on the website. The next feature today is, cleverly enough, nextfeaturetoday.com. You can find all your episodes there. Also, YouTube channels for both of those. And they're both published through podcast platforms. I love LinkedIn. I've been on there for a hideously long time. I was like user number 78,000 or something. And there's, 2 billion people or something on LinkedIn at this point. So I didn't realize how early I was on that train, which is kind of the story of my life. But I love, being connected to people, having conversations. Some of them turn into podcasts or partnerships or all sorts of things. So happy to talk with people. Don't come at me with a hard pitch, because that's probably not going to go well. But if you have honest intentions and are interested in getting to know each other, I'm totally down for it.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you hopping on the show and sharing all that with us.
Yeah, this has been great, Rob. And I definitely got to have you on one of my shows. We'll figure out which one.
Yes. No, anytime. Awesome, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for checking out On Camera, On Brand. This episode is produced by Motion, a podcast agency that helps B2B organizations create their own shows. If you enjoyed what you learned, check out more episodes at motionagency.io/oncameraonbrand.